welcome back. We will discuss what is happening in DeFi, what's going on. We will explore together why DeFi is a paradigm shift in the financial industry as we know it today. Alright guys, and welcome to the end of DeFi 101. This is a bonus track with a discussion together with Zhuang from Shuttle One, which is a DeFi expert. And together we're going to discuss different DeFi topics and his company, Shuttle One. Alright, so let's start off, right? Like, what is your experience with DeFi so far? Maybe start off with a little bit of your background and then your background in DeFi.
So thanks for having me. I think for me personally, I was a banker almost 10 years ago. I lived through the financial crisis. Thereafter, I completely changed tracks. And this is important because it kind of led me into crypto because I became a farmer. I started to farm vegetables in Southeast Asia, particularly in Malaysia. It's also then, that we realized that access to capital, remittances were clear problems which Fintech is trying to solve.
Yeah.
In a very similar fashion to banks, right? Banks does remittances and all that also at the same time. Yeah. Not competing with them, but we believe that crypto and digital assets are really changing the game of how as a medium of exchange, like what USD is, fiat cash is in that sense. So I guess that's where we come in. So personally, I had a little bit of finance. I program a little bit for the banks. We have also been in the crypto space since 2016. So we went through the hype. We went down with the hype, but we're still around.
Yeah. So, like, as you said it yourself, so you were in traditional banking, in centralized finance, and you saw the problem with remittances. And Fintech is trying to solve that. And DeFi is also trying to solve the same problem, but with different approaches. How would you say that the approach from Fintech differs from that approach from DeFi?
So I think for banks, when you start to talk about cash management, remittance has always been touted as a high volume and low or almost no margin game, right? Or almost no margin businesses in that sense. But it doesn't change the fact that people still need to move money around in that sense. Of course, in today's world, in Fintech, which is a graduation from what we know as the banks, there are many companies, trying to tackle that remittance problem in that sense. But every one of them is still, trying to make as much volume as possible so that they can trade, forex currencies and all those things with counterparties, usually with the banks. So this big volume will allow them to get better, rates for forex and all that. We believe that DeFi is changing that. The access to capital. I mean, today we see there are so many pools. There are decentralized exchanges. These are access to capital. In that sense, of course, we are not there yet from a market, supply side point of view. It's hard to even to have more than $100 million in a pool that you will trust. Yeah. But I think it will come, and the access to capital that these remittance houses, like ourselves and our partners has, this kind of changes the game because at the end of the day, you don't need huge balances to get cheaper prices. You can do micropayments, you can do small batches to achieve the same cost and benefit ratio in that sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, you're saying that the remittances market is not really interesting for the banks if it's about small amounts, but in the DeFi market, because it's like really, really peer-to-peer, it's easier to target like people with less access to capital. Yep. And what I also personally see is that DeFi enables like a farmer in Sri Lanka having the same banking assets and the same access to financial instruments that a banker in New York has, for example.
Absolutely.
And that I think will enable very interesting new dynamics. Do you also in your product there is demand for people to because you're active in the Philippines, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, Singapore, and
Thailand.
And Thailand.
Yep.
So that's a huge reach. And what is the biggest demand that you see? Do you see people just want to change from Thai baht into like US dollar, or what kind of patterns are you seeing right now?
So we're seeing we don't see capital flight risk, right? Which is a very pertinent problem that most regulators are concerned about, right? When Bitcoin Ether came out, people were scared. Oh, what if they use too much local currencies to buy Bitcoin Ether, which we saw in the 2017 to 2018 bull market in that sense. However, I think during this phase of DeFi, in that sense, where people are not taking big monies to like dump on Ether or the stable coins as we know that in that sense. So because these stable coins are actually permeating into real world use cases, like for example DAI. We know DAI is used. Let's address it, right? Like, by a lot of traders because DAI is very liquid. It gives you big profits from one exchange to another. But we are beginning to see DAI permeating in the real world where people are using DAI for disaster relief. We use DAI for remittances, and so on and so forth in that sense. So the demand for a truly world-class open finance coin, right? For them to perform their everyday settlements, I think that is very key because they will also still use DAI to buy back their local currency when they trade it out. So that's where the fair balance of capital flight risk comes in.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you see an increase in the demand in the USD stable token because they want to interchange that easily instead of having like an expensive remittance because they have like small amounts. And that's what you're solving. What other like apart from remittances, what kind of other like solutions do you see, and what kind of issues do you see in the market today that's being solved by decentralized finance?
So I think crypto needs a very strong fiat and on and off ramp. That has always been layer one, which companies like ourselves and many other companies around in the industry are solving today in a compliant and legal manner. KYC, AML, blah blah blah. All these things are packed in. I think we have graduated last year when we saw Compound releasing the Compound protocol version 1 and version 2. And Compound is essentially money markets, right? But at least money markets for crypto in that sense. They have Ether, they have DAI, USDC, blah, and so on and so forth. So I think the marriage between fiat on and off ramps and crypto money markets, liquidity pools, if I may, this will fuse together to become a very beautiful liquidity, access to liquidity, and again, being able to change in and out for daily usage in that sense.
Exactly, and also what I'm also seeing in that part, like in a truly trustless financial system, when you create different derivative products that we just touched on, I see today there's still, that's the discussion for later, but there's still a lot of work to be done on that decentralized trustless derivative side. But like, if we can create more trustless financial products, I also see the more traditional market having preferred having a tokenized asset that is cryptographically secured and that they know actually all the different factors that are happening instead of only be secured by law or by certain agreements, but actually having a cryptographically secured in a smart contract, locked assets, either to deal with that and then to deal with like, all the traditional banking agreements.
Good point. I mean, we work very closely with a company called Centrifuge that is based out of Berlin. Centrifuge does tokenizing of assets in general. So right now we're working with them on invoices. They are probably going to graduate to tokenizing of assets and all that. But let's face it, right? Tokenizing of assets is not hard to do.
No.
If you have a blockchain, you have an asset that you are willing to give up representation of, it's done, right? NFTs and all these things. I think the key thing that DeFi will solve for the tokenizing of assets is liquidity.
Yeah.
Right? And this is a huge thing because in 2017, 2018, there were many projects trying to tackle the wrong issue, a solution finding a problem, or a problem finding a solution, sorry, if I may, right? So everybody thought that the problem was representing ownership on chain. Actually, that's not the problem. The problem is liquidity.
Mhm.
And I think, decentralized exchanges, liquidity pools, even money markets like Compound, they are solving those kind of liquidity issues. And if we, again, marry those two together, beautiful. It's a beautiful, financial system in that sense.
And I think the financial system, if we work on a truly trustless, decentralized layer where we can increase trust, the speed is not even that super important. Like even if you have to pay a little bit more transaction fee, as long as we increase the trust, because in my view, after researching more in the DeFi, also more in the centralized financial world, I saw that a lot of value in the financial market is being lost because of trust mitigation, abstraction of trust.
I think to add on to that point, I mean, one simple thing that I think what Compound transformed the industry was coding interest rate, borrower rates on a supply and demand function. Mm-hmm. Simply put, right, like most liquidity pools, supply is high, interest rate goes down, and vice versa in that sense. We don't have this game theoretical economic system in centralized financial institutions because we are bound by a certain set of legal, we are bound by at least two different rates. We have central bank rates and then the bank rate in a sense. And that ties people in that sense. And like you said, right, the gatekeepers and all those stuff.
Yes.
But I think it's beautiful if borrower rates and supply, is matched on free markets, meaning a rolling supply and demand curve in that sense.
Yes.
So in our case, we see that for remittance very clearly. Our remittance partner used to go to the banks for overdrafts. Maybe next month they think, all right, it's a big holiday coming up. Maybe it's Christmas. More people will remit money, overseas, from the destination which they operate in, and they go to the bank for an overdraft, and the bank charges them 7% a month because it's short term, and all that, and that's crazy in that sense. So when we started to testnet and test out how interest rate that's set by demand and supply, of course they form the demand side, and we simulate the supply, coming in. We found that the interest rates are working for them, and not just that, it becomes a very stable interest rate because it's real world demand, right? For the people who contributed to the pool in that sense. So I think that's a great balance.
Do you then also lend out money to people that are not collateralized? Do you do like credit score checks for the people that you lend? Okay, that's a very interesting development. And I also said in my talks that we now have like CDPs, which basically you don't know who the person is. You need to have an over collateralized debt position, right? So that's the only way how it works, because that's how we can do it without knowing the other person, right? But if the decentralized financial space evolves, we will also get more like credit scores and things embedded in the decentralized financial protocol, right? All right. So we were actually sitting here today, and like we found in the library, we found this book, the biography of a bank, and this is basically the story of the Bank of America. And it's very old, so it's very funny that we. Zhuang, you actually found it. I was doing a last recording of a video, and then you were walking around, and this book popped up. So I think it's kind of funny. Will we see in the future like banks also maybe willing to provide liquidity to a DeFi network, or will they be able, or will they want to open up more to like DeFi protocols?
I think to me, there's a lot of excess, as in there's too much. There's a lot of excess in the banks that is getting eaten up post 2008 by regulations, Basel risk, capital requirements, and so on and so forth. Working the bank post 08, I think that's you're tied down to all these regulations, which is part and parcel because you screwed up. Right, in 2008, in that sense.
They screwed up.
I would say that, but and the man on the street felt the effects, and the governments had to step in to deflate their currency, right? Let's just put it that way. I do think there will be new concepts. It might not be the banks as we know it today, because if you read this book, I was just flipping through the contents, right? And there were so many banks in that was written in this book, which are not around anymore.
Of course.
And one thing that came across over and over again in the contents is that there is always a banking crisis in every given generation.
It's a repeating cycle.
It's repeating.
Boom and bust.
It is, yeah. So I think codes and the beauty of smart contracts where we can just code very straightforward conditions.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of access, in terms of provision, I think if we get that right as an industry, I'm not surprised that there will be, liquidity that will be provided from financial institutions as we know it.
Let's work on that together then. That sounds good. So, what are the current financial risk involved in DeFi? Because I was explaining them compound or I earn finance or I and there's very interesting rates. If you calculate the interest rates you get on a bank today, it's negative, and then you go to DeFi and you suddenly get 8 or 10% interest.
I think another elephant in the room is that who are we lending to, right? In DeFi, I mean, for the banks, we don't know that, but we know in general it's all real world demand, it's businesses, blah blah blah. For DeFi, suffice to say, it's more for speculative purposes. I think earlier on for traders, to buy Bitcoins, things like that. I just generally feel that DeFi needs to come back down to earth. We need to be stable in that sense. This high interest rate generally reflects a fragmentation of our markets in that sense. Yeah.
So basically, because of market inefficiencies, the interest rates are at that point, you think?
Yep.
Okay. Isn't then actually not the case then I believe the inefficient markets are the case because there is not enough liquidity to make the markets efficient.
That is one reason.
So if you are actually having the knowledge of the space right now and profit from this interest rate, this can probably maybe go on for some time and then
2 years.
Yeah, probably because it's such a small market and the market is super inefficient. So there's people that borrowing a lot of money to do market making or take arbitrage opportunities. And I think when the opportunities are there, when people see it, they borrow money because they see it, they can make money.
Yep.
And then the market itself makes itself more efficient.
I mean, it's a cycle, right? And that's where the beauty, as I mentioned just now, this supply and demand in a pool. And the interest rate is the equilibrium, is where the market prices itself in that sense.
Yeah.
It might not work for the real world in general, but it definitely will work for some people in that sense.
Yeah, and we talked before off camera a little bit about the decentralized financial stack. I said we have decentralized exchanges, we have decentralized stable tokens, we have decentralized money market, decentralized derivative synthetics, and decentralized insurance. Do you see other things in the stack that you want to add there, or do you think this is quite a full stack? And you think that's the full stack, or?
I think more or less you got it covered. I think insurance is a very interesting place.
Yeah.
I think we have Nexus, we have Opium, a few other concepts that are out there. I generally feel that if DeFi can graduate to something that is more viewable, in a sense, we saw a concept on options, we saw a concept on car loans in the US. You see where anonymous liquidity providers provides loans that are taken out directly from people who want to buy cars. I think that's where DeFi should go into in that sense. But I think it still takes some time because to recognize crypto as a truly valuable asset, it's only just us, right? There's a small community of people.
Small community of people.
We need to enlarge that. We need to move forward. Regulations need to come in.
Yes.
To ring fence, but not to control, right?
Yeah, and one of my presentations basically about the DeFi financial stack. So that's cool. But if we go to security, I believe that basically the market right now is still inefficient because people you need specialized knowledge to handle DeFi. So that's why the market is inefficient. That's why we can make these opportunities. So if we go back to the DeFi decentralized finance stack, like what is the most critical factor of this stack that needs to improve right now on the short term?
Yeah, I think risk management is definitely key.
So insurance, basically.
Insurance, and I think for the technical guys, the coders, a lot of coders, they are coders. They are great because they are great in the programming, in solidity, in the technical codes, but not necessarily they have the same financial background to manage risks and all this. Not going back to the boring stuff, but if there is this gel in between where there could be good risk management coupled with great coders. We have great coders now. Don't get me wrong, but if there are great quants, financial engineers who can come in to shape certain risk management in that sense, I think that's where you will come to a better place.
Why are they staying away? Is there too much money being made on the other side, or are they just not interested, or they think it's still too small of a market for most of these players?
I don't think I think it's still too small of a market, and I think more likely, I think there's no regulations, right? Right now we're at a space where global regulators are figuring out how to manage Bitcoin. But yet we have moved to a stage of, all these stable coins coming liquidity pools from anonymous people. That's going to be a tsunami coming up right there.
That's going to be regulatory. So you see a regulatory tsunami coming up, that the regulations, they just don't see and understand what's going on anymore. But what I always tend to believe, what I always like to see, like hope to believe in the world, is that when we create financial systems that are better for communities, like for example here in the Philippines or in Malaysia or especially emerging markets, do you see a future where we see like separate communities adopting different monetary
I think so. I mean, it generally will be how the codes are set, right? What are the inflation, deflation rates? How are interests being made? And if in general, if people have a clear and easy to use, UI, we will get to a great UX, at the end of the day.
That's very interesting, and that's exactly what you're working on. So I hope to extend that together with Zhuang in the DeFi space here in Southeast Asia. We're very thankful for you all following the DeFi 101 course. If you want to know more about Shuttle One, you can check them on their Twitter, Shuttle_1. In description below, there's a link to that. And you can also check his own Twitter in the description below, or my details are as well in the description below. We wish you the best of luck building in the decentralized financial space. And we believe, both of us, that the decentralized financial ecosystem will be huge. So you can better stack up your knowledge. Be sure to be ready for the tsunami that is coming, and we need to build before the regulation comes in and tries to stifle this down. I think we're still very early on, so keep on learning, keep on going, and I see you at the next video.